Welcome to this session of the PPM Attorney Capital Forum. I'm your host, Darren Mangum. I don't need these, actually. I don't walk around all day with these on. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We're getting started pretty much on time today. Today's session's on Friday. We usually try to have this on Thursdays, but today is a Friday. Again, I know everybody's schedule changes quite a bit, but you can always tune in. If you can't tune in live, you should be getting an email notification about when the sessions are happening. And yeah, like I said, if you miss the session, then no problem. This is being recorded, and it'll be there for your viewing pleasure anytime. So yeah, why don't we go ahead and dive in? Everyone's favorite topic, dealing with federal and state securities regulators. Over my past 23, going on 24 years of securities practice, it's my pleasure to get acquainted with our friends at the SEC and also various state securities regulators. Some are more aggressive than others. Some are more, some you never hear from them. It really just depends on sometimes the luck of the draw. I mean, obviously in smaller states where there's not a lot of investors, like Wyoming, not a lot of people, not a lot of investors. I mean, as I think per capita, there are, quite a few millionaires or probably accredited investors in Wyoming, more so than most states, but, not a lot of people to choose from. So it's not a huge, although it is a great haven for other reasons, when you're talking about entities, jurisdictions of setting up your entities, if you're talking about just raising capital from sheer number of investors, it pales in comparison to, say, New York, California, Texas, a lot of large states, right, where there's lots of people, lots of investors, right? So in those states, securities regulators tend to be a little more aggressive, or more. I wouldn't say aggressive. I would say they have probably bigger budgets. I mean, obviously, the bigger the state, the bigger the budget for probably securities regulation. Some states, like smaller states, like Utah, for example, relatively small state. I think 2 to 3 million. Pretty aggressive when it comes to securities enforcement. I mean, they're very sharp people. I've dealt with them extensively over the years. But yeah, I mean, we can get, you can go state by state jurisdiction. Oh, they're super aggressive or they're not aggressive, and that might be true today, but a year from now, maybe the administration of that state changes, and especially when it comes to the SEC itself. I mean, that's obviously a prime example, right? Prime example of that is, when there's when there's a change in the administration, right, of the president, right? The president appoints the commissioners. Just really briefly, not to get into, not that you care, but I mean, like the SEC commissioners, the Securities and Exchange Commission has a board of 5 people that sit as commissioners, and typically, 3 of them are appointed by the president and his political party. I mean, I guess the president is free to choose whoever they want, but typically, two of the members of the commission are members of the opposing political party. Like, for example, currently, this is being recorded in 2023. The commissioners are, three Democrats and two Republicans, right? So just goes to show you how everything's a two-party system. Anyway, we could get in really into politics really quick, but we won't. Securities regulators, I don't care what parties, Democrats, Republicans, everybody wants free and fair securities markets. Everybody wants protect investors from shady characters, from fraudulent people, right? Everybody wants that, right? No, who doesn't want that? Yeah, everybody wants that, right? So anyway, yeah. So we have the securities laws, and they're administered by the securities regulators. Now, there's a distinct difference. If we can get into so we can get into I've got the outline here to keep us on track. Obviously, that's the role of securities regulators, right? To ensure investor protection and make sure everybody has full disclosure. Basically, you don't want your grandmother to put her life savings into some stupid investment, right? Some cryptocurrency that's just going to evaporate overnight, or even worse, maybe not even a legitimate. Because a lot of cryptocurrencies are legitimate, but maybe some, fraudulent promoter. Like I had one set of grandparents. They invested in all these some big investment scheme about they were going to buy these Iraqi dollars that had from Saddam Hussein's former administration, and somehow these Iraqi dollars were going to become super valuable, and so you got to buy a bunch of them, just stupid scam stuff, right? Nobody wants their grandmother or even anybody to get taken, right? And so the securities regulators are the cops that make sure that everybody's playing fairly and all that. Right now, like most cops, right? Most law enforcement agencies. Maybe they can be a little heavy-handed, right? Maybe they can go overkill, right? They can not only pick up the bad guys, but they scoop up a bunch of good guys that if you happen to be in the wrong, picture yourself in, downtown Chicago, or I don't know, south side of Chicago. I'm in Puerto Rico right now. Picture me down by the ship harbor, where they've got shipping containers. I'm down there at 2:00 in the morning, right? Not a good place to be, right? And there's some bad stuff going down, and the cops show up. They don't care if I'm a good guy or bad guy. They're probably gonna, shoot first, ask questions later. That's the way that's the way a lot of cops are, right? Because they're just looking. They're trying to size you up and determine if you're a good guy or a bad guy, and they're presuming you're a bad guy unless you can show that maybe you're a good guy, right? Securities regulators are no different, okay? They're going to look at with a skewed eye, at any sort of investment opportunity that they see, and if you appear like you're being reasonable, if you appear like you're not promising the moon, and and if they're not getting any investor complaints, right, then they're probably, carry on, citizen, carry on your business. You don't look like a bad guy, a terrorist or a fraudulent person, then likely they're gonna pass you over, right? And the problem with that is a lot of real crooks or real bad guys. You just look at Bernie Madoff, right? For years, just kind of had the aura of invincibility, and he just didn't appear and come across like he was a fraudulent person, right? And so they kind of slipped on by and took a lot of people down, their investment dollars with them until he got caught, right? So anyway, you got and okay, so there we also have a federal system, right? We have state securities regulators and we have federal securities regulators, right? So just like there's state laws and there's federal laws, right? And so you have to abide by both, right? You can't, I comply with the federal rule. Oh yeah, marijuana is legal in Colorado, right? So I'm good to go. Well, no, federal law says it. No, it's not legal, right? Securities laws are no different. There is a fair degree of overlap, but there are certain aspects where federal law applies versus state law, and oftentimes both of them apply, right? So if you run into trouble with the securities laws, you're looking at not only potential state law violations, but you're also looking at federal, right? So, you could be offering investments in your company or your project, and the SEC may look at you and not even pay you the time of day. But for some reason, the state of Alabama or the state of Kansas, you have a number of investors in our state and we don't like the way you're doing this. And so guess what? SEC just drives on by and doesn't even pay you the time of day. But who's up your butt? Some state securities regulator, right? And you may not even be in Kansas, right? You may not even be in Arizona, but you have some investors there. So therefore, they've got your hooks in them, right? Or maybe you don't have investors there, but maybe you're doing some presentations there, or maybe they have some reason. I mean, obviously, if you have zero investors there, you have zero, like in whatever state, pick a state. If you have no investors there, you're not offering the investments there, they really shouldn't be bothering you, right? Now, with the internet nowadays, that's a little difficult, right? Because the internet's everywhere, right? Anybody in any state, any jurisdiction in the world can see what you're doing, right? Or if you put it out on social media, hey, we got this investment. Potentially it's everywhere, right? So you've got the potentiality of, again, both federal and state. Again, even internationally, maybe you're offering the investment in Germany. I mean, have to look at the jurisdiction. I mean, for purposes of the forum, and we deal with securities rules. We have international clients. We deal with all of them, but mostly we deal with federal and U.S. federal and state securities laws, right? So, So anyway, you want to make sure you're compliant with both. Now, when it comes to and we've talked about different exemptions in the past forum sessions. Ideally, you'd want a deal with exemptions where you're only really having to deal with one regulator versus several dozen, right? And so that's why we always emphasize the importance of trying to comply with federal, like what we call a federally covered securities exemption, which means Congress has preempted the states, right, in creating rules that say, hey, maybe you may be okay at the federal level, but you're not okay at the state level. Certain exemptions they're what we call federally covered means, hey, if you're good to go if you abided by the rules at the federal level, then you're automatically presumed to be okay at the state level, right? It's meant to prevent having to reinvent the wheel every time you're raising capital, right? Now, there's sometimes anyway, and we can get into the various exemptions, right? But I want to focus our time on you definitely want to make sure that you are complying with these state securities laws as well as the federal securities laws. State securities laws are often referred to as blue sky laws. Which I won't get into the history of that. That's I'll probably take 10 minutes to get into why they call blue sky laws. Well, actually, if you must know, state securities laws existed prior to the federal securities laws. So, some states had taken it upon themselves, which is a very common practice, right? Sometimes states they say, hey, the feds aren't really doing anything with this problem. We're going to make our own laws, and then later the feds catch up. At least that's the way it used to be. Anyway, so again, whether you're dealing with federal and state securities laws, you still have to provide full disclosure. That's obviously what our law firm does. But so let's get into dealing with the regulator, right? When would you likely have to deal with a regulator? And again, you may be 100%. 100% honest, doing everything by the book, following the letter, following what your securities attorney is telling you by the book, right? But luck of the draw, right? Like you could be an upstanding citizen and pay your taxes and vote when you're supposed to, and donate to charity, go to church, all that, but then, hey, you get pulled over, right? You get pulled over by the cops for, your light's out on your car, or, hey, you changed lanes and did something, or whatever reason, some random reason why the police, hey, I would like to check you out, make sure you're not a bad guy, right? And so what are they going to look at? Well, or do you have your license, your registration? They're going to look at those things and determine whether or not, and guarantee when the cops are walking up to you in the car, they got their hand on their gun, presuming you're a bad guy until you show that you're not, right? So securities regulators are the same way. Likely you would, your first interaction with them may be, usually it's something catches their attention, right? Just like any police, right? They saw you change lanes, or in a securities regulation context, they may have gotten a complaint, right, from an investor, right, that says, hey, I gave Billy Bob, I gave him like $10,000, and he said we were going to invest in crypto, and now I haven't heard from him, or hey, I invested in this company, maybe it was a full PPM and all that, hey, I invested in this company like, 10, 12 months ago, and yeah, they thanked me for the investment then, but since then I haven't heard anything from them, right? And I've reached out maybe a few times. Investor communication is the key to preventing an investor to start complaining. But then again, you may communicate. Maybe things aren't going that well, right? Maybe the market is up and down, or maybe you're struggling with the company, right? 12 months ago, everything was great. Everybody looked exciting, and now, you know what? we thought we were gonna, be making money now, and so far we're not. Because of competition, or because of whatever, the economy is bad, or whatever. There's a pandemic, right? We're not making money like we thought we were going to do. So investors, they have use varying degrees of patience, right? How long do they want to wait, or whatever explanation or excuse you gave them. Maybe they don't like it, right? Or maybe they have their own pressures, right? So investor complaining is usually a typical reason why they would complain to the SEC or complain to the state securities regulator. When I was in law school, I worked at the SEC, did 2 internships, one in Los Angeles and one in Salt Lake City, and part of my job while I was there was to look at investor complaints that were coming in. I would and see if there was something, and so we would go through and, hey, we've got these investor complaints, and we would look into them and maybe call the investor and, hey, I'd like to get more information, get their story, and maybe there was something there. Most of the time it was sort of like, okay, one isolated investor was complaining, we're not gonna, they're not gonna come burn your house down just because some isolated event. Now, if it became a pattern, like, oh wow, we've got, 10 investors called in the past 10 days about the same company, right? And they're saying kind of the same thing. Okay, well, maybe, hey, there may be a fire over there, and maybe we might want to do something, right? Most of the time, you'll receive a letter, right? You're not going to get a phone call, hey, we'd like to talk to you. No, you'll get a letter, right? And the letter is a kind of a boilerplate letter saying, hey, basically it's an inquiry, right? Like, hey, we're conducting most of the time it's an informal inquiry about your company, and we want to make sure you're compliant with the law, and so please give us everything in the world, all the documents in your whole company related to, in the past 10 years, right? They'll be super broad, like, hey, give us all this information. We don't know if any, they say, oh, we're not sure if anything is bad has occurred, or, we're not claiming that there has been a violation of the securities laws, but we want to check under the hood, right? We want to know what's going on. And so please give us a list of all your investors. Please give us a list of all of your, investor documents. Give me, again, like getting pulled over by the police. Let's see your paperwork, right? Let's see if you're a real person, right? Let's see if you are legitimate, right? And so if you ever do get a letter like that, immediately you need to. I would always advise you to not call the securities regulator up and give them a hard time. I would immediately contact a securities attorney, right? Not that. I'm not trying to drum up business, but you want to be represented by counsel anytime you're dealing with the regulator, because the regulator is going to use anything and everything that you give them potentially against you, right? And depending on how things are going, with your business or what has transpired to kind of cause this inquiry to happen in the first place, potentially you might, give them too much information so that it works against you to your detriment, right? Legally, right? It's kind of like, if you watch the TV shows, legal TV shows, your self-incrimination, right? We have a right against self-incrimination, right? And so you could, there may be circumstances where, and I've been in situations where, based on the facts, based on what's going on, I'm like, what? You're probably going to need to plead the Fifth Amendment on this, which it never looks good, right? Why? Because, hey, you got to plead the Fifth Amendment, the right against self-incrimination. We're going to presume that you're really bad, right? Because you probably, it just is a fact of life, that, if somebody pleads the Fifth Amendment, oh yeah, they're guilty, right? Something bad, right? So that's going to ratchet up possibly the interest level. So I had a client once who was an oil and gas client. They had raised a bunch of money for some oil and gas projects, and he made the mistake of, when he got the inquiry letter, he did not retain counsel, right? He basically, took the letter and in red pencil, right? He answered in handwriting on the letter itself, not applicable, or none of your business, or it was crazy, like. And because he sent me a copy of it like later, right? This is after he got in big trouble, right? Because it's a long story, but anyway, he basically thumbed his nose at the regulator, saying instead of having an attorney do it, right, in a very proper way, he sort of like wrote the letter and said, hey, it's none of your business. I don't, and he answered some of the questions in red pencil, and then he just mailed it back to them, right? So you can imagine the SEC regulator getting this back, right? Number one, it's like, okay, this guy is a little bit wacko, right? Who does that, right? Even if you wrote a nice typewritten letter, right? Basically, said, oh, you know what, I'm not really taking you seriously, right? And if you communicate back with a regulator that it's, they're not a big deal, right? Just like any human being, right? If you're saying, hey, I don't really have to deal with you, you're like not my concern, right? What are they immediately going to do, right? They're going to go to guns, right? If you got pulled over by the cops and they said, oh, could I see your driver's license and registration? And you suddenly wave them off, say, no, I don't have time for you. I'm not giving it to you. I'm leaving, right? Basically, that's what he said, right? Man, that's like fast way to get arrested, right? And in this context, they just ratcheted up the investigation. The guy, like, okay, this guy is not taking us seriously. We're going to go to guns on him. And not only was it started out just to be an informal inquiry, and the problem was he was very much compliant from day one, but his response to the regulators was just, dismal, right? And by the time he did retain counsel, he had done a number of steps to really put him behind the 8 ball, right? And anyway, I won't tell you how that ended up, but it did not end up well for them, right? Anyway, so you want to take it seriously and you want to keep it positive, upbeat, and it's a pain in the butt, right? Who wants to be subject, spend your valuable time responding to this this inquiry, right? Because it really took them literally 5 minutes to crank off this form letter saying, hey, give us all your information, right? It's going to take you a lot of time and a lot of expense to have to respond to them, right? But it's worth it. It's worth it, and to have a reputable securities firm being on your side, right? When you do respond, it definitely lowers the tension, right? You would think, some people might think the opposite. Oh, if I get lawyers involved, that's going to escalate things. Well, no, it's not. What that communicates to the regulator is that, yes, I do take this seriously. I do have competent securities counsel. Even if you can't find securities counsel, at least some attorney, like if you have a general counsel, somebody that's just a run-of-the-mill general corporate counsel, very minimum have them respond, and saying, hey, I'm representing the company, and you want to communicate, hey, and we're fully intending to comply with you. That communication needs to happen right off the bat, right? And that attorney would need to call the regulator personally and said, hey, just a little heads up, little friendly introduction. Hey, we got your inquiry letter. Thank you very much for that letter. And we intend to take this very seriously and give you the information you need so you can do your job, right? That goes over super well with the regulator, right? Now, if the regulator thinks you're just blowing them full of smoke and they really think you're a bad guy, maybe they're not going to maybe they're not going to give it a lot of credibility, right? But at least you tell them, hey, yeah, I'm willing to play by your rules and play this game with you. Then that is something that is really critical, right? And it's like human nature dealing with anybody, right? They want to be taken seriously. They want to feel like you respect them, right? And that you're willing to do that, right? So anyway, that needs to be happening right off the bat, and then you can negotiate with them time. Hey, because usually these inquiry letters will, they'll give you, hey, within 2 weeks we want you to give you a million pounds of documents, right? That you have access to, and all of your emails and blah blah blah, right? Now, obviously, that's unreasonable. That's not, there's not enough time for that. So, usually with counsel involved, you can, hey, we need at least more time, and then even then, hey, we'll give you information as we have it, and we had a client one time that was, started out, well, I mean, yeah, we got involved with them after they had already done a lot of things that may or may not have been 100% legal. And, they were subject to an SEC inquiry and also a state inquiry out both at the same time. And we had to basically run point and quarterback between those two regulators, right? And they were hot on the trail, right? They were just really aggressive. Now there's various levels of aggression, and I'll tell you the story in a second. But there's different levels of inquiry that you need to be able to respond to in a timely way. Obviously an informal inquiry is one level. A formal letter of investigation that usually comes along with a subpoena, right? Okay, that's like a higher level, or it's one notch higher, and then that means they are super serious about it. They're not just like, it's not a fishing expedition, right? They really think they've got something, right? And they're not going to tell you what they've got, right? And that's part of the problem with dealing with things in with the outside of litigation, right? And when you get into litigation, people think, oh, that's the worst, right? That's the worst place to be. Well, from a cost standpoint, you're right. It's a lot more expensive to be in litigation, and from an optics point of view, it's a lot worse. But you do in litigation, at least you have discovery, right? Where the rules of evidence, the rules of procedure, the rules of discovery. I mean, you have a court that is requiring both parties, both the government and you, to provide information, and so you're able to get more information on what's going on the other side, what's going on in their head, what information do they have, because all the information has to come out in order for everybody to prepare to get ready for trial, right? Whereas in a purely regulatory standpoint, especially if there's no formal investigation, really, the SEC and state regulators, they don't have to share with you anything, right? Because you don't have any right to it, supposedly. I mean, you'd have, if you try to get a Freedom of Information request or that sort of thing, but that takes a lot of time and that's expensive. So a lot of times, they're playing their cards close to the vest, and so you're trying to guess at what they've got, right? What sparked the inquiry in the first place, all of that, right? So if you can obviously if you're not cooperating with them, obviously sometimes you got to make tough calls, right? You have to weigh, okay, what's in the best interest of the company, the health of the company. Maybe giving you my investor list is just going to be a death sentence, right? Because guess what? If I give you my investor list, you're going to call all those investors and freak them out, and now they're going to be up in arms, right? And not only would I have an SEC investigation or a regulator investigation to deal with, but now I've got maybe 100 investors that are all freaked out, right? And so you sort of have to balance some of these issues, and obviously securities attorneys can help you navigate that, right? But you want to try to, obviously, like most issues, the sooner they're put to bed, the sooner you can lower the level of the investigators' cause for concern, the better, right? If you try to slow pedal it, if you try to drag it out, then their level's going to go up. Now, that is a strategy, right? Which we've often employed, because if you're not, unless you're the next Bernie Madoff and you're the next big fraud case that they're going to try to put a notch on their belt for, then oftentimes dragging out the investigation is a great strategy, because it buys you time. You're able to maybe mitigate, you're able to take proactive measures with your investors to let them know what's going on, so they're on your side and not the regulator's side, right? And that's really going to depend on how much credibility and trust they have with you, right? Anyway, so so I was this example that I gave you of this other client, we would give them information, but in a very slow way. Not in a overtly intentional way, but it was difficult to get all this information in a timely way, and so we were, the regulator would threaten and threaten, and say okay, but we never the client never did just they didn't drag it out unnecessarily, but they didn't give them all the information up front. Anyway, it sounds bad. It's not like they're withholding the information, but they're like, look, we're a small company. We can only get it to you as fast as we can. And the regulator, they're not doing anything else. Yeah, they may have multiple cases, but they just want it ASAP so they can continue to do their work. And the last thing they want to do is wait around for you to get the information, right? So, but anyway, we were able to offer that information. Again, in what our view was fully compliant with the subpoena, but yet not in a way that just offered the client's head on a silver platter either, right? And over the course of a couple of years, and this literally went on a few years like this, the regulator's attention was continuously being drawn away from our client's case to other cases, right? And other cases that were bigger and more problematic, right? And so we would offer up information and then maybe wait, 4 to 6 months before the regulator would circle back to us again. Oh, hey, you still haven't given me this and this. Oh, okay, we'll give you that. And so, and eventually the regulator just sort of, I think one regulator that was working the case retired. Another regulator went and worked at a private law firm, and they handed the ball to somebody else, and that somebody else didn't think it was that big of a case. They weren't as interested in it as these other guys were. So they just wound up, the case just kind of died on its own, right? Didn't go anywhere, right? And so that was a strategy that, had we just given all the information, broken our backs and bent over backwards, whatever you want to say, to give them all the information immediately, well, they may have, it may have prematurely killed the company, right? So there is you want to be very proactive, but at the same time, it helps to, again, every case is different, right? You just want to, at the end of the day, you want to have competent securities counsel involved under any circumstances, and also, here on the outline I've got here, preparing, assembling the necessary documentation, right? So certainly information that really shouldn't be that difficult to have. You should have paperwork on all your investors. You should have copies of your offering documents, copies of your SEC filing. Everything that your securities attorney has prepared for you. You want that to be really available at a moment's notice, right? And that way, if you can provide them with enough information, right, then yeah, they'll likely, and you still may have to deal with whatever sparked the inquiry, but you may be able to throw them off the case a lot quicker. And in some cases, you may be dealing with a regulator that may be overly aggressive, that may be unreasonable, and so sometimes you might say, okay, well, you know what, we're not able to work with you. If you want to sue us, then we'll deal with you in front of a judge, right? There would be instances where that would be applicable or advisable, right? So it really depends. So anyway, I guess the big takeaway is that, to the session here is you want to be very proactive when it comes to dealing with an investigation or a regulator, even if it's just a minor. I mean, you might get a phone call. You might just get just sort of a weird fishing expedition phone call that may. And I've seen that happen too, where they don't want to necessarily tip their hand and hey, we're investigating you with a formal letter, right? But hey, they may just call you up and just kind of play dumb, and say, hey, yeah, and some state securities regulators are sometimes guilty of that, right? And it's kind of dirty tricks, but I've seen them sometimes. They'll just call up and pretend that they're an investor. They won't tell you who they really are. Or even worse, they'll have one of their buddies call who's not a securities regulator, but yeah, they just want to pretend like, oh, maybe I'm an investor, and see what happens, right? And then if you're not playing by the rules, then they pitch you over to the regulator, right? So you just got to be careful on who you're talking to and all that, right? So I've got one. I'm going to cover one question here, and yeah, again, if there's any other topics that you're wondering about, let me know. You could send them to forum@mangumlaw.net, and I'll get it, and we'll respond to that. And but yeah, you can certainly. I'm gonna respond to this one because I think we're running out of time for today's session. But let me address. David here says. Hey, I got a letter from the Texas State Securities Board. Do I have to respond to it? I think the answer is yes, but what is the reason? You got to think, why would I get a letter from the State Securities Board? Obviously look at the content of the letter. What are they asking about, right? Usually they're going to identify, hey, we'd like to know more information about X, Y, and Z, right? And maybe they're not even investigating you, right? Maybe you might be an investor, right? And that invested in some deal 5 years ago that went belly up, right? And they want to know if you have information as a witness, right? So that might be the case. If that's the case, then maybe I don't know, maybe if you don't want to hassle with it, I would ignore it, right, and see if they pester you. Or obviously, if they're subpoenaing you, you have to comply with that. But if it's just a letter, maybe it is a fishing expedition, right? So, but normally it would be detailed enough in the letter that you know exactly what they're asking about. And so I would definitely, very rarely would I just suggest ignoring it. Because there is some reason behind it, and even then, I've had situations where, clients have called me, they get some letter out of the blue, and I said, you know what, and I ask them, do you have any investors in that state? Do you have any, or you have any offering materials in that state? No. The answer is no. I don't know why Alaska would be sending me this inquiry letter, right? And then I just pick up the phone, as their securities attorney. I'm like, hey, I'm, Darren Mangum, securities lawyer for XYZ company. I'm looking at this copy of your letter. Hey, what's the deal with it? What's going on there? Oh, well, yeah, we saw this website and blah blah blah, and then okay, well, and maybe in some cases I've been able just to explain on the phone what the deal with that was, or say, oh yeah, you know what, that website that went up. Is no longer up, and it was a mistake. Like, well, the client put it out there, their web team put it out there prematurely, and since it's been taken down, and it was a mistake, right? And then in that case, it was like, oh, okay, it was a mistake, and then it's like, okay, well, it doesn't sound like anything bad's going wrong. Okay, have a nice day, right? I didn't have to formally send a letter, and the letter was like crazy long, like give us everything, blah, 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 all this information, and in that case, just a phone call was able to solve it, which that's kind of a rare example, right? Usually you're going to have to provide them with, to make them satisfied, you're probably going to, in most cases, you're going to give them a lot more detailed information. But the fact that I picked up the phone and talked to the guy in person, okay, I'm a human being, you're a human being, we're all wanting to be compliant, blah, blah, blah. It just brings that tension level down. And now they're able to put a face and a name with that company that before that was sort of a mystery, right? I just saw this thing, and again, what do they presume it's something bad, right off the bat. And that human contact by your attorney, not you. I would never advise you to go pick up the phone and you to talk to them, because then if you're not an attorney, they're going to just reel you in, because most of the time they're attorneys or they're an investigator working for an attorney, and they're going to try to draw as much information from you as possible with the hope that they can maybe use it against you, right? That's the bottom line, right? So anyway, we are out of time today's session. We appreciate everybody attending. We will post the outline to the website, so you can, and also this recording, so you can watch it anytime on your own time. And again, also we want to make sure that everybody that asks for it, that's a member of the forum, is introduced to our preferred capital provider, Marquee Equity. If you want to be introduced to Marquee Equity as a funding source, and I should say I throw out Marquee Equity because they're who we've been dealing with lately. They're not our only capital sources that we have relationships with. We have got relationships with family offices, broker dealers, different kinds of people. We just think for the cost and for the value, Marquee Equity really does a great job, and so they at least should be somebody you should initially talk to, right? There's lots of different options there, and so anyway, we're glad to help there. But anyway, thank you for watching, and we hope to see you on the next session. Thank you.